last year, one of our security researchers, Mo, discovered an unsafe deserialization vulnerability in Apache struts. It turned out to allow remote code execution, and it was also part of the default configuration for struts. So this was a pretty high impact vulnerability. Today, I'm going to show you how to find unsafe deserialization vulnerabilities using QL. You can see here that I've got a copy of QL for Eclipse. I have a snapshot of struts from August last year, which includes the vulnerability loaded up, and I'm going to walk you through the process of finding that vulnerability with QL. So to start, I'm just going to look for all of the places in the code where we potentially perform deserialization. And so I'm interested in calls where the method, the thing that's being called, has the name from XML. So let's see. And obviously, you can put you can search for others. Okay, so that's finished. We've got two results here. We can click on these, and we can jump to the source code in the snapshot, and we can see that sure enough, these are both calls to from XML. Now, this is not necessarily enough for these to be vulnerable. In addition to just doing the deserialization, the user has to be able to control kind of the value that's being passed into from XML. So this is a pretty typical type of problem. When you're doing variance analysis, you have some value that is potentially user controlled, and you want to know if it reaches a sort of dangerous operation. And so Semel provides a library that will allow you to do Dataflow analysis. I've just pulled that in with these imports here. And that's what I'm going to use to try and decide for each of these from XML calls, is this something that's really vulnerable, or are they okay? So the first thing I need to do is define a configuration, a Dataflow configuration that tells us, what are the sources, what are the things that the user might be able to control, and what are the sinks, in this case, the arguments to from XML. So there's a little bit of boilerplate here while I set this up. And then the kind of the information I need to provide here is what are the sources. So this is how I do that. And we're going to say something is a source if it's a kind of, oops, it's a kind of remote flow source, and this is a class that's provided by Semel. It covers a lot of your kind of standard ways that an end user can control a value in a Java application, and so this includes things like all of the web server annotations and these sorts of things that you'll be familiar with. Of course, if you want to add your own or customize that, then you can put whatever you want in here. So now I'm going to do the same for the sinks, and we said earlier that the sinks are going to be, well, anything that gets passed in to from XML is potentially dangerous. So something is a sink if there is a call to from XML, and one of the arguments to that call is our sink. So I've written my configuration. Now I can go ahead and actually use that in the query. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get the flow config. I'm going to get I'm going to get a path node, which is the source, and a path node that is the sink. And the only kind of condition I'm going to impose on these is that under the configuration that I gave, there is a flow from the source to the sink. And then I'm going to return the source. And that kind of says when the user clicks on this result, where should we send them? And I'm additionally going to give the source and the sink. And this tells us to kind of provide a bit of context for this result, show how data gets between these two things, and finally, a message to display. So I can now run that. Okay, that's finished, and we've got two results here. You can see the first one is in test code, so I'll skip over that, and we can take a look at the second result here. So this is going to be the source. As you can see, request is an HTTP servlet request, and the input stream on that is something that's likely to be user controlled. And up here on the right, we've got this path explorer. This actually shows us all of the steps that we go through to get from this source to the sink, which is going to be the argument to from XML. So we start with the input stream here. You can see it gets wrapped in a reader there, and then is passed into this toObject method. If we move to the next stage, here we've got the parameter to toObject on XStream handler. And again, going back, we can see that handler is a content type handler. So if you can send a request which is going to be handled by the XStream handler, then you can pass whatever data you want into this from XML method, and that will allow you to get remote code execution with an appropriately crafted request. So that shows you how to write a simple query that will find vulnerabilities like this. You can see that it's easy to modify if you have your own sources. Maybe you've got a custom web server, something like that. Or if you want to customize the sinks as well, looking for other types of deserialization, it's easy to do that as well. You can tweak this even further, adding things like barriers for sanitization and things like that to really customize this as much as you want and make sure it gives you great results.